Okay, it is Thursday, March 11th, and this is for nutrition and dietary choices, and we are still in our vegetarian unit. So we are going to be making today a Ratatouille Pita pizza, right? So a great way to get in all your veggies, a little bit of cheese, lots of seasoning and flavorings, right, to go with it, but it's a great way to still have pizza, but cut back on some of the calories and some of those toppings that you don't want, right? And a good way to get in more veggies too. So I'm going to start off today with some eggplant. I've got my cast iron pan back here on my stove, just preheating, right? It's already a little bit warm. I just turned it up just a little bit more, right? And we're going to start with our eggplant. Now you could use, this is kind of a large eggplant. It's not super big, but you could use those smaller Japanese style eggplants, the skinnier ones for this as well. But I'm only going to cut this, so I basically need about half. Right? I will use the other half up later. But, so we're going to come in. All the veggies have been washed and dried already, right? Make sure your veggies are clean. Always. Right? We're just going to slice through and cut this in half. There we go. Set the other half to the side. We're going to trim off this stem end here. Okay? And then we're going to just cut some slices down because we're going to be building our pizza, so we want to have a nice little shingled ratatouille on top of our pita. So we want to come in and do some nice thin slices, right? And by cutting it in half, it'll fit a little bit better on our small pitas as well, right? We don't want, something that's going to not fit on here, okay? So I'm not going to need the whole piece. The rest of this will get cooked up, all the extra veggies later, into a traditional classic ratatouille. So don't waste any leftovers, right? Or you just make extra pizzas after. But what I am going to do is just put this into a bowl real quick here. This is about 1/4 of an eggplant. And I'm just going to drizzle this with just a little bit of olive oil. I've got my cast iron pan heating up on the stove. This is the one thing that you want to pre-cook a little bit. Eggplant takes a little bit longer to cook. So this is the one veggie that we're going to par cook in advance. Okay. So I've got that, like I said, I've got the cast iron pan on back here on the stove, and I got a good pair of tongs. Right. We're just going to set these in. And we want to get them into a single layer and just par cook them so they get a little bit softened. A little bit of brown color on them is fine, but they're going to cook more in the oven to finish, right? So we're only par cooking them. Then for the rest of our ratatouille ingredients, right, we've got those classic ingredients. We've got some summer squash, some zucchini. We've got a little bit of orange pepper, right, to give a nice little pop color and contrast. Plum tomato and some onion, right? So now we're going to cut up the rest of these veggies for our pizza and put them all into a big bowl, right? So we're going to use that same bowl I just used for the oil. So we'll start with our summer squash here. So these aren't super big this time of year, but we want to take and give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more of an angle to our cuts. So if I just cut straight through, I'm going to get really small circles, and it's not as cute, right? So we're going to cut on the bias, okay? So when you think of your veggies, right, so your veggies this way, when you're doing a bias cut, your knife is this way, right? So you cut down at an angle, right, as you go through, okay? So we're going to trim off this end here. Like I said, I'm going to slice down. So when you look at this, right, like I said, a little bit of that angle. Now I'm going to get a nice elongated bias cut, right? So it looks a little bit fancier. Makes it look bigger than it is. So nice thin slices. That should be good. All right. We're going to take and pop that into our bowl here. And this is all going to get mixed together. And you'll see where we're going to assemble these in a little bit. Keeping an eye on my eggplant that's par cooking back here. A little flip. So at this point, they're already a little bit brown on one side. Right, getting a little bit of color on them. My pan is really good and hot. So I'm just going to flip them and shut the pan off and let it just finish for another minute on the other side. Okay. Now for zucchini, same thing. We're going to do that little bit of a bias cut. All right. Just to help elongate it. So if you're trying to do things, you know, fancy and stuff like that, right? Like I said, it just gives it a nicer look than just circles. Right? A little bit of that oblong shape to it. And this is a really small zucchini. You'll find much bigger ones in the summertime, right? But this time of year, they tend to be on the petite side. Okay, so we're going to add this right in with our summer squash in the bowl. And then we're going to do a little bit of onion, right? So we're going to do some sliced onion in here. So I'm going to take and trim off the stem end, right? That's the part that grows up out of the ground. Okay. Flip this upside down, right? Cut through that center of that root, but keeping that root intact. We're only going to need half an onion here, so I'm just going to peel this. And we're going to do some nice thin slices, right? Stick to thin side so that they'll cook fast enough in the oven, right? You don't want to have a raw onion paste on your pizza, right? Push that into the trash. So the root end is here, right? Here's our rainbow on the front of our onion. We're going to slice down, right? But like I said, nice and thin as you go through it. Okay? So you get some nice thin strips. Okay. We're going to add that into our bowl with our veggies. So we're going to start building all of our flavors together, right? So ratatouille is traditionally known as a peasant stew, right? So French, south of France, Provence region, right? But this was just a little bit fancier, a little fun twist. But you can also do a classic ratatouille just by taking all of these veggies and chopping them up, you know, kind of cube bite size, and make a really nice rustic ratatouille stew that way, right? So I pulled off my eggplant off of the stove, right? So we've got the eggplant here. We've got our squash, zucchini, right? And our onion, the eggplant all together. Now we're going to need a little bit of pepper, just for some color, right? So that's why I got an orange pepper, but you could use a green pepper. You could use a yellow one, right? Your red pepper, it's up to you. These are all been, like I said, all been pre-washed and dried, right? So I'm just going to slice down the side of this pepper. Okay. I'm going to take a couple of sides off. So I'm holding on to that core stem, right? And you could do that all the way around to get the rest of it off without your seeds, right? And then that way you get a nice clean cut. If you have anything in here like little membranes, it doesn't hurt anything, but if you just want to clean it up a little bit, you just come in with the tip of your knife. There you go, right? So we're going to cut some strips of pepper to add into our ratatouille. Like I said, this will give us a really nice punch of color. So we'll cut this in half. It's a little bit too big to fit on our small pitas. We're only using those like 4 or 5 inch size pita as our base, as our crust, right? So lots of colors. Now we're going to add in something that wasn't mentioned in the recipe, was tomatoes. We are going to be using a tomato sauce on our crust, but I like to add in and use some real plum tomatoes, right? So going to trim through this. Now, if your knife is not super sharp for cutting tomatoes, especially when this is a really nice ripe plum tomato, right? If you don't have a super sharp knife, use a serrated knife, okay? This way you'll be able to slice through, you know, just kind of use that sawing motion, right, without tearing it apart, okay? So we're going to do some nice thin slices of our tomato. Especially when tomatoes are ripe, if your knife is not super sharp, it will not cut through easily. It'll tend to mush your tomato up. Right. Cut through that. There we go, right? We're going to be adding that into our bowl of veggies. Okay. We're just going to clean up our counter here. So we've got all our veggies prepped, right? We've got everything together. A couple other ingredients are still going to go onto our pizzas, though. So what we're going to do is take about a tablespoon of olive oil into our veggie mix, some black pepper. Now, this recipe recommended garlic salt. I'm leaving that out because I'm going to use fresh garlic on our crust instead. Right. Good, generous pinch of kosher salt. Right. And then instead of using just, you know, thyme and basil, I'm actually going to use this here, which is herbs of Provence, right? So herbs of Provence is a blend, right, that is based, you know, from, you know, recipes and ingredients from the south of France, and that's where this one is from, right? It is a mixture of things like summer savory, thyme, oregano, basil, rosemary, lavender. So it already has all of those spices together. So just run it through your fingers, give that good little pinch, right? When you're putting those herbs in. And don't be shy, a couple of good pinches worth, at least a teaspoon's full. But by breaking them up in your fingers when you're putting them in, it starts to break and release those flavors, right? So now we're just going to come in and gently toss all of our veggies, right? Like I said, and this is just beautiful. You know, colors, you eat with your eyes, right? So if you're going to eat healthy and you're looking for some way to get more veggies in, right, make it look good, right? Lots of flavor, right? Lots of color to that. Look at that, right? Beautiful. So now we've got a couple of cloves of garlic left to chop and our cheese, right? So I've got my clove of garlic here. Give it a good whack. Pop off our peel. Okay. Then we will give it a little trim on that root end, right? Cut off anything that's dry or questionable, right? You don't want to eat something that's not appealing. Little pinch of salt so our garlic doesn't slide around too much, right? And then we're just going to chop through that. And you want to get this fairly fine, what we call minced, right? Through. All right. We're going to keep this to the side because I'm going to add this onto, so a little bit of garlic onto each of the pieces, right? So we get that little pop of garlic hidden on top of the crust, right? There we go. So now, need the knife real quick. We're going to talk about cheese. Now you could just use shredded mozzarella for this. That's fine. I am going to use some block mozzarella, fresh mozzarella, right? Just because I like the consistency. It's going to be something a little bit different, a little, you know, fancier, right? So I'm just going to take a chunk off of this here. And I'm going to slice this down again so I can get some more manageable size pieces because our pitas are a little bit on the small side, right? So just give this a nice thin slice. We've got our little chunks here. And these will melt beautifully. This will be our hidden little secret under the veggies, right? That nice fresh mozzarella. So stick that over here to the side. So this is about a third of a package of a 1 pound package. And I'm going to be doing 6 of these pizzas, so that'll be plenty for that. So 1 package mozzarella will do a lot. So you can always just get the little mozzarella ball size, and that would be plenty for this recipe. Like I said, or you could use the shredded, right? So we've got our nice little fresh mozzarella. So we'll stick that over here out of the way. And then we're going to go to our pitas, right? So I've got a tray set up here with some Silpat, but you could use some parchment paper. You could use some aluminum foil, right? Just something to catch any drips and messes so you don't have to do too much scrubbing on your pan, right? And these are a wheat pita with oat bran and flaxseed, right? They're only about 50 calories a pita, so it's a good start as a base, right? Because we're thinning out our crust, less bread, less carbs, okay? So we're going to take and just use some jarred pizza sauce, right? Whatever you like. Pizza sauce, marinara sauce, just a plain tomato sauce. You can add your own seasonings to it, right? And just like building any pizza, you need to start with some sauce at the bottom, right? Try not to put too much, though, because you're going to get a lot of juice and moisture from your veggies. So we don't want these to end up being soggy. A nice thin coat on the base of each one. And we're going to add our fresh chopped garlic and our mozzarella right to this. That's why I still have those separate here on the board. Just using that back of the spoon to spread it out. Like I said, if you don't like a certain veggie and things, you could always leave it off, right? It's, this recipe is really versatile in what you can do with it, right? So we're going to put a little bit of garlic in each one, just a little punch of flavor. Spread that around with the fork in just a sec. Make sure we get some on each one. Don't leave any good garlic behind, right? Like I said, you could just take a little fork and spread it out so all your garlic's not in one bite, right? But you could use things like garlic powder if you don't have any fresh garlic on hand. You could use garlic salt, which the recipe did call for, but just watch how much salt you put on your veggies in that case, right? Because you don't want to add too much salt to this recipe. Then it won't be as tasty. Okay, so now with that fresh mozzarella, I'm just going to layer some of these around on our pizza. So this is going to be our base. We've got our sauce. We've got our fresh garlic. Right? And then we've got our fresh mozzarella. Right? Nice little punch of flavor there. But like I said, you can use the shredded cheese as well. That's fine. Okay. Extra pieces on there. There we go. That's good. Okay. So that's our base for our pizzas, right? So we've got our pitas, our sauce, our chopped fresh garlic, our sliced fresh mozzarella. And then we need to add our veggies. So we've got a bowl full of veggies here. Now you could come in and shingle them, right, and get extra fancy. And alternate your veggies, right? Some eggplant, some things, just like that traditional Ratatouille look, right? Fine. You could also just mound them up, which I'll show you that after for a couple of them, right, as well. A little fun. Then you want to make sure you're adding in some of that onion to your pizzas, right? A little bit of onion, a little bit of those pepper strips, that extra pop of color, right? Like I said, you could just choose to mound them up. Just put a handful of veggies on each. That's perfectly acceptable, right? You see how big our summer squash is compared to everything else. A little bit of eggplant here. Those are kind of small, so we're going to put an extra one. Some veggies, right? Lots and lots of veggies, right? We talk about eating all the colors in your diet, right? So we've been spending a lot of time learning about what's good for you, right, to have and things. And this is one of those ways that, you're eating all of those color spectrums, right? Your red vegetables, your green, your oranges and things, right? So you can, like I said, you can make them a little bit on the fancier side, or you could just come in and grab a handful of your veg, right, to save time, and then just arrange it that way. You may want to, pop in extra pieces of things if you notice you don't have enough color or something, right? But it depends on how fancy you want to be. So I'll start with some base squashes here. Some of our other veg. It's got a lot of green, so we're going to add some other stuff to that one, right? Just to save time here today. Like I said, don't forget your peppers and your onions, right? All that good flavor, right? Everything's been infused with that herbs of Provence, right? Some kosher salt, some black pepper. Maybe a little more eggplant on this one, right? And then just make sure you've got everything combined. So if you have extra veggie left over, just sit it to the side. You can just saute these in a pan real quick, and they're good to go for a little snack or to have for the next day, right? And that's our pita pizza. Now, I already have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, right? So I'm going to put these in the oven, and then I'm going to show you the finished ones. Okay. Look at these, right? So these are the finished Ratatouille pita pizzas, right? Look at that. All those veggies. Like I said, the rest of them will roast in the oven, right? Giving that eggplant a little bit of a head start. is good because that veggie takes a little bit longer than your other ones, but having everything about the same thickness and slicing, right, also helps. Take a little plate here. Grab one of these guys. There's a big one here. And there you go, right? So there's your pizza. You know, calorie-wise and things, you know, it's not going to be a lot because a lot of these veggies are very low calorie. You know, maybe about 50 calories for the cheese, about 50 calories for the pita, as is a little bit of oil and sauce and things. You know, so you're looking at, you know, less than 200 calories total for a nice, you know, ratatouille pizza. Like I said, you can design it however you like. You can get as fancy as you want, so that way, you know, it could be movie ready, right? Great way to eat your veggies. Like I said, you know, if you want to try, you can also, you know, just rough chop up the veggies instead of doing the thin slices. Any leftovers and things like that, throw them in a pot, a little bit of olive oil, stew everything together. Ratatouille also freezes well if you have leftovers on the veggies. So cook them through, at least par cook them, then freeze it, right? And save it for another day. Okay, so that is our ratatouille pita pizza, good vegetarian recipe. If you wanted to make this vegan, you could use a vegan cheese instead, like soya, right? You could just leave it out if you'd like as well, too. You could also use gluten-free pitas and things like that and adjust it as needed, okay? So hopefully it's something you guys try at home and enjoy.